Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is, what's today? Friday. But it feels like Friday. December 9th, 2016. Maybe that's it. It's December 9th, 2016. But it feels like December 16th, 2000. You know how this thing goes. Oh, boy. Okay, well, we made it to the end of yet another week. Donald Trump, still appears to be slated to take over as president of the United States. I don't seem to be able to do anything about that. But, increasingly, he's growing increasingly bold in the emoluments, let's say, that he is going to allow himself, and I don't see any relief in sight. It turns out, let's see, yesterday we mentioned that he had gone from I don't care about my business, I'm going to give it up, to I'm going to totally separate myself from the running of the business, to I'm going to retain an ownership stake in the business. I guess this morning's revelation is that he's going to continue to executive produce Celebrity Apprentice for NBC, allegedly in his spare time, of which there's plenty when you are a, demented idiot president, I guess. I suppose we should be, I'm not sure where to come down on this. Are we glad for any time he spends away from actually trying to president, as George W. Bush might have put it? I don't know. The latest thing about Apprentice, according to Kellyanne Conway, who just continues to be a complete lunatic for what I assume is good money. I assume they're actually getting their paychecks up at the top levels. Anyway, well, let's see. I don't even know what to tell you about that one. The idea that he's going to have any spare time. I mean, you remember, of course, how critical he was anytime Barack Obama would do anything, of course, whether he would go and play a round of golf or whether he would go on the road and campaign for Hillary Clinton. He was, mock furious in his tweeting. Well, aren't you supposed to be running the country? So this reminds you, by the way, that anytime you see Donald Trump vacationing or playing around a golf, and I don't imagine he'll give golf up during the presidency, but who knows? Maybe he will. He actually isn't that good at it, or not as good as he claims anyway, but I'm sure he enjoys it. So the question is, what does it mean when you see him on vacation? I doubt he'll give those up. Or playing golf, or doing anything that's just not working. I mean, is that spare time? You got the spare time that you don't see, I'm using for producing the Celebrity Apprentice, which he's not. I mean, he's not doing anything. He's just claiming a credit for it so that he can have an income stream from it. They're not using his input on anything. Or occasionally, I'm sure he will send them notes and say, I want you to do things. I watched the show and I want you to put more boobs on it, whatever it is. And, because I'm executive producer, now send me $1 million check. So, I mean, it won't take him very much time, I guess. But, probably the bigger issue is, although this is a weird one, and because it's a little bit in reverse, we would know what to do if the billionaire president was sending dollars to NBC and NBC was covering him uncritically in their news department. What do we make of the relationship here, where NBC Entertainment will be paying the president, while at the same time the news division will be covering the president? I don't know whether that's what is that? Is that a conflict of interest? Is that something? I guess it's a conflict of interest for NBC. I guess. I mean, they're paying him. That is weird. That's a very different situation. And I imagine. I mean, I would guess that Celebrity Apprentice does better as a show. That is, makes more ad revenue if Donald Trump gets positive coverage from NBC News. I mean, you don't want negative coverage if it's a show executive produced by the guy who's being impeached for bribery and sexual assaults, which continue throughout his presidency, let's say, that's not going to sell, I guess, a lot of ads. So I guess it's up to NBC to decide. This is going to be interesting. I would imagine the NBC News division people are vomiting right now. But that's nothing new. They probably are anyway. So how do you like that? This will be the first time that the president and Chuck Todd are on the same payroll, though. So that should be interesting. We'll see how they deal with that. My goodness. But who cares? It's just one of a million things that, make no goddamn sense whatsoever and are just added to the pile of reasons not to get up in the morning, I guess. There's just no controlling this guy. And there never will be. He's accountable only to a not only a friendly, but a fawning and fearful Congress. So, I don't really know. There's just no hope for it. He's going to loot the country. And the best you can hope for is that collectively he and his other looters don't empty it out so badly that the place just collapses and we, become the new third world. Although I guess it's our turn eventually. So, get yourself to a place where there's fresh water and build a sod hut. just so you have a place to get to. All right. Well, happy Friday. What else can we discuss? What other angles are there on this? This is, here's something I want to remind you of. I've been reminding everybody this morning and yesterday evening. We talked about it on the show the other day. And it's relevant again in light of the recent fight that Donald Trump had with Boeing, in that Boeing, after their dust up and finding that their Air Force One contract is in trouble, word is just the other day that Boeing will be contributing $1 million to the Donald Trump inaugural committee funds. Corporate money is okay again. It was never illegal to donate corporate money to inaugural committees, which is, weird and stuff. But I don't know. We've always thought of inaugural committees as somehow different from campaign committees, and short-term thing, and it's for use that's typically very public, and everybody sees the festivities being put on and imagines, this does appear to be a rather expensive thing. And then, of course, the parties as well are big to do. So we've never really paid a great deal of attention to it. And then when Barack Obama decided he would not accept, I guess it was just a voluntary thing, not accept corporate donations for the inaugural fund, everybody sort of stopped looking at the whole at the situation. Nobody was particularly worried about how the money was going to be used because it's all blown in one day basically, and no one cared. I guess that's it. Maybe that's the only thing I can think of. Anyway, what? Rest of the story, I guess, is, as I told you the other day, the FEC does not require any reporting at all of how that kind of money is spent. It's not on the they don't have a form. That's the best way to put it. The FEC does not have a form, even if you wanted to declare where inaugural committee money is being spent. There's no form for it. I mean, you could make up your own form. It's easy enough. You could just grab the forms, I guess, from any candidate's filings and scratch out the thing on the top, or file as an inaugural committee and put that name up top. But I don't think anybody has ever done it. Nobody's ever cared. Well, money's rolling in. It's coming from corporate sources again. In particular, it's coming from corporate sources in the case of Boeing, who have a particular reason to worry that their contracts are under threat, and they want to be seen as making nice with Donald Trump, and he's very open and clear about the way to make nice with Donald Trump. Get dollars in his pocket. So, between the fact that there's not even any method of reporting how inaugural committees spend their money, and the fact that Donald Trump so far has released none of his taxes, and I have my doubts about whether he intends to release any tax information as president either. And I think even there's actually some more requirements to do so than there is as a candidate. There's nothing enforceable as a candidate except shame, and well, that didn't work. There may be some I think there are federal requirements of some kind for disclosure information to be filed that would include tax returns while you are a sitting president. But I guess I would ask you, what if he doesn't do that? I mean, what if, right? The law controlling it doesn't say, and if you don't, you're not president anymore, or we get to kick you in the crotch, or every American gets to slap you for as many dollars as they think you. I don't know. There's no remedy. It's up to Congress. They can impeach him if he doesn't do it, or they can reprimand him. People can talk bad about him in the press, but you can't do that either, because then you'll be attacked. And harassed. Plenty of stories this morning also making the rounds about every time he singles somebody out on Twitter and attacks them politically, and it's of course always punching down from wherever he might be. But there was a story circulating yesterday about he didn't like a question that he got at one of the town hall appearances he made, and he tweeted that he doesn't like this young woman, I think like a 19-year-old girl, who asked them this question, and then the trolls take over. They find out, he doesn't like this one particular person. Look her up on the internet. It didn't even wait to do it on their own. As I recall, now I have to find the story. I hadn't even planned on reading this one in particular, but, the Trump campaign's social media director got her name and looked up her social media profile and Facebook page and took screenshots of it and tweeted it out as the campaign, official. And I don't even know what to tell you about that. Then of course people start calling her on the phone, and we know where you live, and we're going to kill you. And of course it has to come along with threats of rape and sexual assault, because as you know, they fear nothing more, of course, than being sexually assaulted themselves. That's exactly what they, and so they project that on everybody, and they think, just generally, that's, if they want to scare somebody, the thing you do, is threaten to rape them. And sometimes they do that to men too. I don't know. It's very weird. But they have this very strange, I laugh because there's this strange, ground on which they tread, and here we're talking about ultra right-wing trolls, and there's a weird mix of them who are. It depends on how homophobic they are. In addition, if they're fanatically homophobic, of course, they don't want. I don't want to kill anybody. See me threatening to rape a man. No, I'll send somebody else. Or they fret over these things. Others are, I guess, equal opportunity rapists, which is awful. And then, of course, we know where your kids go to school or whatever. This young woman doesn't have any kids, but they were doing that to the union president that he's gotten in a fight with over the carrier deal. They're crazy. And thankfully, they're a small slice of the group, but it worries me that they exist, of course, because people who aren't used to online trolling, they get this kind of pushback, and then they say, I want to disappear. I want to hide. They leave the field, and that's the thing. That's what they're looking for. They're not going to show up and harass you. Occasionally, if you find yourself out in public in a way that they can identify you, they might yell at you. And that's no good. It's frightening and all, but the idea here is to get a hold of your phone number or your email or whatever and dump a bunch of threats on there, and in the hopes that you'll stop doing what you're doing and stop speaking. That's all they really want, is they want you to stop speaking. And they know, 75% of the time, if you just go crazy on somebody and threaten them, they will. They'll shut up. They'll go away. That's a problem solved. They usually collect themselves and then bounce back and come back in a year. But if you're silent for a year, that's a win. That's all they're about. I don't say don't worry about it, but I say keep that in mind. Anyway, that was a little bit of a detour, I think, from what I was thinking about doing today. But, man, there's an awful lot. We'll bounce around between a number of these themes, I am sure. Let me make sure that Pocket is up and running so that we have our vast reserve of stories to dip into here. I wonder if I scroll back just a little bit, maybe I can find those stories. But, now I need to make notes along the way. This is why we need the producer to make a note. Yeah, look up find the story about the young woman who was harassed. It's in wide circulation. I think it's even in the Washington Post. But it flew through almost there. I'm sure it made its way through your Twitter feed as well. So be on the lookout for it. Take a look. And, keep in mind all of these instances of corruption essentially fall to the Congress to oversee. It'll be their word as to whether or not he pays any consequences for any of this stuff. And again, I'll put out the speculation, and you'll never know whether I'm right or not. But I'm pretty sure that with all of this, particularly with all the corporate money floating around in an unaccountable slush fund like the inaugural committee funds, I don't believe that Donald Trump lets an opportunity like that lie. I'm pretty sure that he'll find a way to convert a giant chunk of that extra cash into something for himself, which it already is. I mean, and I guess maybe that's the reason why you don't even bother with the reporting, or traditionally we haven't asked for any reporting on expenditures. We know the whole purpose of it is to spend that money on a gigantic celebration of the person who just got elected president. So, we don't track it that much. But we would start tracking it if we came to believe that it was just being converted into giant checks and put in the president's personal bank accounts. That would probably raise some eyebrows. But you'll never know, because you're not going to see his taxes and you're not going to see the expenditures. So I'm pretty sure, he's a guy who has got 1 foot in Hollywood or whatever. I guess not necessarily Hollywood, but entertainment production. He's used to taking appearance fees for things. His daughter is used to taking appearance fees for things. They're just going to convert the excess cash, or maybe they'll take first cut, who knows, and say, appearance fee, or call it a management fee, or call it anything. Just don't call it anything at all. You don't have to call it anything. You're not reporting it on anything. And you're not showing anybody your taxes. So call it what you want. Put $1 million check in my hand and shut the hell up, essentially. That's all there is to it. And again, there'll be no accountability for it. Moving on to the collection of stories that I put aside to share with you, because it's always good to have somebody else's organized perspective on these things. Happen to scoop this one up from the week, which is not ordinarily a source I go to, but it's one that Greg points to frequently. Ryan Cooper, who, I don't know whether the name, it's familiar enough, but I mean, I know there's 15 Ryans and 85 Coopers, so I don't know whether I do know him, don't know who he is. Anyway, he's written this piece in the week, which I guess is a good follow-up for this if you're worried about the idea of holding Donald Trump accountable for any of this stuff. And the answer is you won't be able to do it. This won't cheer you up. It's just, all I said is it's about that. America's corrosive lack of accountability, Ryan Cooper writes. Yep. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Donald Trump's short political career is his near total impunity from the usual rules of politics. He gets away with it, be it unavoidable conflicts of interest, an endless parade of vile statements, or constantly lying about everything. These, as George Zimmerman says, these assholes always get away with it, right? I don't know what you can say on radio these days, but I mumbled that pretty good. So, the word I was telling you about, a-hole, which I think is a form of it that I think you can still get away with. I've even heard this one on TV. Well, we'll check in on what the latest standards are. And I guess maybe that changes. Do you think the FCC under Donald Trump is more laid back in terms of its regulation because of his anti-regulatory bent, or do you think they crack down because he's about old-timey, the good old days when you couldn't say anything on the radio or television, or do you think it's just straight up, if your station gives me money, you can do what you want? I don't know. I guess we'll see. Anyway, yeah, he gets away with it. Hillary Clinton's campaign was largely centered around casting Trump as some deviant outlier from traditional political and ethical norms. And indeed, Trump is quite unpopular, but with the exception of the Access Hollywood tape, none of it really stuck. And even that wasn't enough to keep Trump from winning. There are no doubt many reasons for Trump's non-stick persona, not least of which is his preternatural ability to manipulate the media and grab attention. But another one is a general culture of impunity that has taken root in the American elite over the last 2 decades. That would be the reason that so many people voted against Hillary Clinton. They were angry that she was so elitist and so unaccountable to everything, so therefore Donald Trump. But different set of people. Okay. Trump is taking things much further than ever before, but he builds on years and years of instinctive elite wagon circling around virtually any misdeed. Yeah, I get where you're coming from. It's not always the same people, but the insistence that they not jail any bankers, the idea of, well, it's weird to put these prominent citizens in jail. Jail's for poor people that we don't care about. Not for rich people. And if they have to go to jail, well, okay, then it's one of those federal prisons where you get to play tennis, right? Take the problem of nonsense in the news, for example. Yeah, I guess even Ryan Cooper baffled by what to call things, right? The big debate over whether to call it fake news or just lying or propaganda or what. I think there are many different kinds of fake news, and it's a dumb moniker for covering it all, but hey, whatever. Take the problem of nonsense in the news, he says, for example. Fake news and conspiracy theories have become a sort of epistemic emergency in 2016. People in Macedonia and elsewhere discovered it was fantastically profitable to just straight up fabricate stuff like Pope endorses Trump to get Facebook clicks from conservative rubes. Meanwhile, in the darker corners of the internet, committed conspiracy nuts have been running hog wild, leading to things like some woman threatening a Sandy Hook mother, theorized to be part of a false flag operation, and a shooting in a D.C. pizza joint, which was theorized to be helping Hillary Clinton run an underground pedophile ring. Of course, both of those stories. And amazingly, I guess, not amazingly at all, really, is that the Sandy Hook thing, well, like most right-wing reaction to almost anything, of course, the idea is ludicrous, but consider that the motivating factor behind this is you say, I know that you're faking it and part of a false flag operation because nobody is crazy enough to just come out of nowhere and randomly kill children. And I'm so angry that you would say that someone would do such a thing that I wanted to call you on the phone and let you know that one day, if you don't stop, I will randomly show up and kill you or your children just to prove that no one would ever do this. What? Yeah, it's like the people that originally, when they stopped a long time ago, or at least I no longer see them doing this, but would threaten me over gun fail tweets and say, you'll be sorry You say you think everybody should live in gun-free zones. I don't say that. You think no one should have a gun for personal protection at home, huh? I don't even say that. But I do say you're increasing the odds that you'll have some trouble, particularly if you're, stupid or irresponsible or weird enough to be the kind of person who would threaten people. But go on. What was it you were going to say? And, it usually comes to this. They say, I'll show you that you need a gun, that everybody needs a gun at home for protection. I will break into your house and kill you, and then you'll be sorry. Well, then I won't be sorry. I'll be dead. But I will shoot you in the leg then, and then you'll be sorry. I'll kill your family, and you'll have to see it. Then you'll wish you had a gun. Yeah, it's probably true. I would probably wish to kill you at that point. Sure. Of course, I could use a ladder or a swimming pool. Everything's dangerous. Fork, whatever. And of course, I guess there's we can't foreclose the possibility that there's a gun around. Who knows, right? I'm not saying take away people's guns. I'm saying try and be a little more careful and try and realize what kind of a trouble you're getting into when you have more guns around more kids, like bringing them into schools. But we all know that story. Anyway, the threatening nature of that stuff there, the whole premise is, you're crazy to think that you don't need to have a gun because somebody might one day, at random break into your house. And you could say, I calculate the odds as particularly low and I'm willing to take that risk given the risk of having a gun in the house with small children. Or you could go the other way and say, I think I can handle that risk, especially given that I probably am not going to have to take the gun out a whole lot for actual self-defense. I can just take it out for practice and keeping on top of things in case, right? It's cheating, though, guys, to say, well, I'll target your house specifically to show you the dangers of random crime. No, that's not random crime. That's intentional crime. You can't plot to it. I mean, people who find out that they have a number of insane enemies who intend to threaten their lives, they do. They buy guns and they store them at home and think, now I'm safe, or at least they think they're safer. Unless this is a roundabout way to get me to buy more guns or something like that, in which case it's a fantastic sales pitch. You're doing terrific work. Keep it up. But the idea that intentionally targeting my house will demonstrate to me the dangers of random crime, no, it demonstrates the dangers of intentional crime. Anyway, that wasn't really part of Ryan Cooper's article. Sorry, Ryan. We'll continue with your piece here. I should not interrupt people's coherent thoughts with my incoherent ramblings. But, I mean, doesn't this happen to you? Is this not why you listen to the show? Do you not read articles at home, even without me reading them in your ear, and say, that reminds me of a thing? Sometimes I'm sure you don't walk away from the article for 5 minutes talking to yourself about what it reminded you of. It just occurs to you, and you have the thought, and you move on. Why I can't do that? I don't know. I'll talk to a psychopharmacologist about that. Anyway, yet, as Nathan Robinson argues, Ryan tells us, the media must share some blame for this state of affairs, that is, the weirdness, the fake news, and the lack of accountability. To pick out a few of many examples, nearly all the top American publications earnestly helped the Bush administration sell the invasion of Iraq. Yeah, I remember that. Laundering its cooked intelligence on the front page of the New York Times, the Washington Post, and in many, many other places. The invasion was obviously idiotic, even granting the fraudulent intelligence, but the vast majority of the pundit class went along with it. This doesn't usually appear in the Week, or it never used to anyway. In 2004, Bush again connived with Times editors to quash a story about his warrantless wiretapping scheme. Reporter James Risen had to threaten to put it in a book to get the story published after Bush was reelected. Remember that? Remember when they didn't want to insert themselves in the election for fear of affecting the outcome? I wish the FBI had that sort of scruples, but they don't. Barely anyone paid a professional price for any of this. Instead, like the time when Fareed Zakaria was caught repeatedly plagiarizing in print and on his CNN show, everyone basically forgot it as quickly as possible. Mistakes were made, nobody could have predicted them, and everybody failed upward. The mainstream media's self-image is a respectable, serious steward of fact, and that image is not remotely consonant with their behavior over the past decade and a half. Even today, stentorian tut-tutting, about fake news is published alongside a grossly irresponsible and paper-thin story accusing several honest left-leaning sites of being Russian stooges. Or consider the CIA's enhanced interrogation program. This was, according to the President of the United States and the nation's top law enforcement officer, a program of torture. Torture is illegal under U.S. law, punishable by up to 20 years in prison. This is a law that actually has a remedy attached to it, and is a capital crime with no statute of limitations if it causes a death, which happened multiple times. Yet, the idea that someone at the CIA should face a criminal investigation, let alone prosecution, was an impossible thought. The media, the president, and nearly all of the rest of the political class have internalized the idea that the CIA and the rest of the security and intelligence apparatus, most likely, is literally above the law. Prosecuting anyone there for a very straightforward crime, one of the worst in the criminal code, is, for the American elite, simply a thought which cannot be allowed to surface. That's true. In fact, I've I don't know how many times I've told the story straight up or what, but I had that conversation with the president, and he's kind of one of those people. We just don't do that here. It's not done. We don't put people like that on trial and put them in jail. It's looking backward. We got to look forward. It wasn't based entirely on we don't do that. It was based on this is a forward-looking administration, and et cetera, et cetera. But the effect is the same. This is a no drama thing for him. Well, that's why the process of confirming that the CIA did indeed commit acts of torture. In the process of doing so, President Obama also delivered a pious lecture about not being too sanctimonious about the patriots who had a tough job. Yeah, one of the worst low points, really, of the administration. But, I understood what he was doing. I didn't agree, but I didn't think that there was any really super clear consensus way forward either. Probably worst of all, in terms of enabling Trump's corrosive behavior, is the failure to prosecute anyone over the financial crisis and the ensuing epidemic of foreclosures. And gosh, I guess I'd have to agree there too. I'm very agreeable on these things this morning. Sadly, not many people care that much about illegal torture in secret prisons around the globe, but something like 9.3 million people lost their homes during the foreclosure crisis. The knock-on economic damages, that's cute. Knock-on economic damage to communities that had significant concentrations of such homes was catastrophic. This is another instance in which the law-breaking was so obvious that it could not possibly be denied. Absolutely true. Once again, David Dayen tops in the field in illustrating that in his book, Chain of Title. If you haven't read it, do it. Buy it for yourself for the holidays. Ask someone else to buy it for you for the holidays. If you have read it, buy another one, and send it to Donald Trump. Autograph it, send it to Donald Trump, and that's, put some money in David's pocket. It's where it belongs, if you ask me. All right. There's another instance, this is another instance, as we said, in which the lawbreaking was so obvious it could not possibly be denied. Many, many mortgage-backed securities almost certainly violated some sort of financial law, or more than one. And then, of course, there was just the outright counterfeiting of documents. It's contempt of court, if nothing else, for God's sake. Anyway, more obvious still, after the crisis, banks had whole teams of people systematically committing document and securities fraud, right, to fake up the paperwork necessary to foreclose on people because they had lost nearly all of it during the mortgage boom or never had it in the first place. But once again, the elite balked at the tremendous disruption of the financial system, or to the financial system, and the damage to the fevered egos on Wall Street, implied by mass prosecution of bankers. A series of wrist-slap fines were the best they could muster. And, of course, no admission of wrongdoing in lots of those fantastic settlement statements. Taken together, all this created a fertile seedbed for someone like Trump. To a sizable fraction of the population, the American elite appears as a feather-bedding, wagon-circling pack of incompetents who care first and foremost about protecting their own ranks and only slightly, if at all, about representing and protecting the American people. Some of that perception is unfair or hysterical, but very far from all of it is. Now, how that results in hiring for the job, if you like to put it that way, the biggest feather-bedding, wagon-circling pack of incompetents ever assembled, I have no idea. But, I guess if you're willing to run on the no, we're not, they are platform, then I guess you could do just about anything. Is it any wonder that the president-elect's signature characteristic is a sneering contempt for the failed and corrupt political establishment? That's how our article ends. He makes some good, strong points, but, you could go on a considerably greater length about this subject, if you ask me, but that's true of almost any subject for me. Okay. Well, it was interesting to read it in the pages of the week, anyway. Let's see. We'll go over to Pocket. Oh, yes. You know who had an interesting take on things, or at least had an interesting tweet summary of what he was talking about? Well, by golly, it's Josh Marshall, writing over at his publisher's blog on Talking Points Memo, doing a little what we'll call prime speculating. Some good stuff. It is speculative, just like my insistence that he's paying himself an appearance fee. But hey, he's more open and honest about it being speculative than I am. I'm planting fake news. I'm just diving into the fake news game. Although I forgot, the part I neglected to do was setting up a website that has the ads that you click on, that I would make money from doing it. So I'm doing it for free. It's very foolish of me. All right. So Josh wrote a thing here. Says maybe the answer is that he can't divest. By the way, what an awful puffy faced picture is accompanying this one. It's really rather startling. But okay. Asking the question, why is it that he's even bothering to try to get away with maintaining ownership interest in his businesses while sitting as president? And Josh speculates maybe the answer is he can't divest. Since Donald Trump's surprise election 1 month ago, there's been a bubbling conversation about the mammoth conflicts of interest he will have if he is running or even owning his far-flung business enterprises while serving as the head of state. By the way, I've been noticing traditional mainstream type media stories on the issue referring to his massive global empire or massive global business. I think this states it a little bit better, but I guess that's to be expected given the eventual conclusion of the piece. But just pointing out that he's, far-flung business enterprises. That's fair enough and doesn't overstate the case. Josh continues here, I've suggested that the whole notion of conflicts of interest doesn't really capture what we're dealing with here, which is really a pretty open effort to leverage the presidency to expand his family business. But a couple of things came together for me today which make me think we've all missed the real issue. And if that isn't the point of running Talking Points Memo or Vox or what have you, I don't know what it is. I mean, that's you live for the moment where you get to tell everybody you're all missing the point. The real issue. But okay. Good. Well, he's made a business of it because he's good at it. So go ahead, Josh. What's the real point? Maybe he can't divest, he says, because he's too underwater to do so, or, more likely, he's too dependent on current and expanding cash flow to divest or even turn the reins over to someone else. Maybe we all did miss that point, except Armando, who made that point every day of the campaign, and we helped him do it. So, kudos to you guys. You're so smart. That's why you're listening to Kagro in the morning. Or maybe we made you smart. Wouldn't that be fantastic? It's a little bit of a self-selecting audience here, right? If you weren't, that keyed into these issues about the campaign, you're probably listening elsewhere. So congratulations to you for being smart. I think you're smart, not just because you're listening. Anyway, late this afternoon, we got news that Trump will remain as executive producer of The Apprentice, now starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, by the way. That is quite simply weird. I think that's a technical term, but I think you get the point of it. Weird. The presidency is time-consuming and complicated. These things have to be stated. It's true. Even for the lazier presidents. Does Trump really need to do this? Can he do it just in terms of hours in the day? Of course, it may be a simple title that entitles him to draw a check, and that's really all it is. But he does need the check. Does he need the check that bad? That's really the issue, right? I mean, he says, I don't care. Remember that when that was the line? I'll divest or give the business over to my kids. I don't care about my business. Running the country is so much more important. He's hanging on to a check from one of we think this guy belongs in the White House because of his business experience, because he's got a vast global empire. A guy that has a vast global empire doesn't need the paycheck for executive producing Celebrity Apprentice. It's just, on the other hand, he's just like, why wouldn't I grab any cash I can? Well, okay, that's true, except that's the kind of ridiculous, lunatic, childish attitude I would expect from you if you were just out there money grubbing, but you're president now. What's the difference, he says. So there we go. Does he need the check that bad? I guess so. The idea that Trump is heavily leveraged and reliant on ongoing cash flow to keep his business empire from coming apart and collapsing into bankruptcy was frequently discussed during the campaign. But it's gotten pretty little attention since he was elected. Here's something else. After Trump got into that scuffle with Boeing, reporters asked about his ownership of Boeing stock. Trump replied that he'd already sold that stock, so there was no problem. But there's a bit more to it than that. According to a spokesman, Trump sold all of his stock back in June, a portfolio which his disclosures suggest was worth as much as $38 million. Trump told Matt Lauer that he sold the stock because he was confident he'd win and would have a tremendous conflict of interest owning all of these different companies while serving as president. Now, come on, Josh writes. Donald Trump sold off all his equities more than 6 months before he could become president because he was concerned about conflicts of interest? Please, that doesn't pass the laugh test. But consider this. During the primaries, Donald Trump loaned his campaign roughly $50 million. Over the course of the spring, as it became increasingly likely he'd be the nominee, that loan became increasingly conspicuous. Donors were wary of donating big money because they didn't want him to use it to pay himself back for that loan. Many suggested that he might not actually be able to part with that money. It became a big issue, and Trump refused to forgive the loans. It was only in June that Trump finally gave in and forgave the loan. This was confirmed in the June FEC disclosure that came out in late July. Who knows why Trump sold off all his stock holdings? Maybe he just had a feeling. Maybe he thought the market was too hot. Maybe he just had a spasm of prospective ethical concern. But let's be honest. The most obvious explanation is that forgiving that debt from his campaign required him, through whatever mix of contingencies, to free up more cash, either for the campaign or personal expenses, or perhaps to have a certain amount of cash on hand because of terms of other debts. It does not seem plausible at all that the timing is coincidental. Since we don't have Trump's tax returns, there's just a huge amount we don't know about his business. What we do know is that Trump appears to wildly exaggerate the scale of his wealth and exhibit a stinginess that is very hard to square with a man of the kinds of means he claims. A heavily leveraged business, one that is indebted and dependent on cash flow to keep everything moving forward, can be kind of like a shark. It has to keep moving forward or it dies. Perhaps Trump simply doesn't feel like he can trust anyone else to keep the whole shambling enterprise afloat. More plausibly, and consistent with Trump's history over the last couple decades, Trump's business is dependent on an ever-expanding number of deals, not just to grow, but to stay afloat at all. It is certainly plausible that if Trump simply sold off his company in toto, he'd be in debt. Maybe there wouldn't be anything left to put in a blind trust. This is all necessarily speculative because Trump has kept the details of his business empire hidden from the public. But behavior, circumstantial evidence, and lots of evidence of tight reliance on cash flow to service debts of various sorts suggest that Trump may not be able to divest or separate himself from his business. Why doesn't he? Why does he court all this controversy? Because he can't. He can't divest. If this is all true, the peril of Trump's foreign deals is larger than we may realize. It's not just a matter of hitting the billionaire big time. It could be a matter of staying afloat at all. Entirely possible, entirely plausible, really. But you'll never know. There's just no possibility of finding out, and I doubt very much whether you'll get any more tax information out of him anytime in the future either. So, I mean, I guess that's what's up with the manic pace of all of the licensing and naming deals. They bring a lot of cash up front, and they don't cost anything. And you'll see a huge push to get more and more of those things built because they bring in the cash. So, well, very interesting. A good guess, I would say, and well worth sharing. Let's see. Another thing that I shared this morning via Twitter, I thought this was really very clever, and so I want to mention it on the air. The tweet from Mick Spocky. Who is Mick Spocky? It's a big mystery. No, it isn't. It's Mick Spocky. Apparently, no mystery to some 57,402 of you among the Twitterverse. But the profile is filled with familiar progressive hashtags: liberal, progressive, Democrat, Unite Blue, top progressive P2, right? I'm still with her, feminist, right? Crooked Donald, not my president-elect, all those good things. But well done here with the memeing. A picture of Mexico's president signing some paperwork of some kind with a nice Mexican flag green tie on as well. And the meme points this out, makes this point. We're building a carrier plant in Mexico. The people of Indiana are paying for it. It's a good turnabout. Well done. Good memeing, right? We're going to build a big, beautiful wall, and we'll make Mexico pay. I'm like building a big, beautiful carrier plant now, and Indiana is paying. Yesterday we found out that now I think the number of jobs being retained in Indiana in this downsizing is considerably below 1,000 now. I believe it's below 800 at last count. And word is that the company intends to use the tax preferences and the big cash payday they got for agreeing to leave 790 jobs behind. They're going to use that money for more automation at their plant, which will, of course, eliminate a good portion of the 790 jobs remaining. In the meantime, the actual jobs will go down to Mexico at the expense of Indiana's taxpayers. Good job, everybody. Well done. Good meme, though. Really, seriously. I think that really hits the nail on the head. Okay, let's see. We got a number of things here. Let's see. We've got, here's something I definitely wanted to, and I made a promise to make mention of. A tweet yesterday from, are you listening to the show? I'm not 100% sure, but I guess the request was that we use a little bit of airtime to remind everybody, today being Friday, we have coming up on Saturday the last Senate race, the runoff election in Louisiana, where Democrat Foster Campbell stands poised to bring the numbers in the Senate down to, I think if he wins, it'll be 51-49 in the Senate. Still, obviously, there was no chance of grabbing back the majority, but every seat counts, of course. And I don't know that much about Foster Campbell. I know I'd prefer that he win. I know that I'm glad that there were a lot of folks that decided to chip in and help make it possible. You got to give yourself every opportunity, make things as difficult as possible for the Republican majority in the Senate to get anything done, and have them worry every time. The closer the margins, the more they have to worry about their own caucus or conference fracturing. One or two holdouts makes things extraordinarily difficult. And hey, senators are a weird bunch of people. There are a lot of old guys there in the Senate. People move on for one reason or another. They run for governor. They drop dead. They hike the Appalachian Trail. It doesn't take a whole lot in a 51-49 Senate to really throw things into chaos, even if nobody leaves. So, by all means, be paying attention. At this stage of the game, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they'll happily take it, but donations to the campaign, it's pretty difficult to deploy those resources to the field now. But certainly, if you know anybody at all in Louisiana, and if you are in Louisiana, then you do. That's not difficult to imagine. Make sure you go and vote. I've always wondered why Louisiana retains this ludicrous system, but it's no more ludicrous than any other system. And really, honestly, it's actually pretty smart to set things up so that you have to give somebody over 50% in order to install them in office, because we're doing the opposite with our president. Hi-yo. But I see that the source of my reminder, who tweets under the handle of Black Belted, so I guess that tells us a little bit of something about how you spend your spare time, but has the username of James's House. How do you like that? You know how we do that? Like, my username is, of course, David Waldman, but the address, the handle is at KagroX, so he's at Black Belted. James's House sent me a note yesterday saying, David, can we... Okay, there was a little typo. You might have seen it. Don't worry about the typos. David, can we turn up the noise for Foster Campbell's runoff election for Senate on Saturday? Blues need that seat for the Affordable Care Act, Social Security, Medicare, etc. Absolutely true. And a million other things as well. So move to Louisiana and vote. Yeah, right. Well, we can't do that anymore. I don't know what the registration laws are like there in Louisiana, but certainly, if you know anybody who knows anybody in Louisiana, maybe you want to do some of that phone banking. Maybe you still want to send some money. You never know. They'll be happy to take it, I'm sure. There'll be debt to take care of one way or another. Show them that you support his hanging in there and participating and taking a shot at bringing the numbers down as much as possible. So he also tweets again this morning in all caps, and I will retweet you in all caps. You, me, and everyone we know, let's get out the vote. Tell everyone in Louisiana that you know to vote tomorrow. Pull the handle for, and if you're looking for the campaign on Twitter, at Campbell for L.A., Louisiana. L.A., not Los Angeles, the other L.A. So take a look. Connect with the campaign. Campbell, spelled exactly as you think, just like the soup. See, he's so wholesome and American. It's odd. I don't know. Anyway, do be sure to let anyone you might happen to know in Louisiana know that Saturday voting, how does that work out for them, by the way? Do they find good turnout for that? Or is the fact that it's not on the big election day. I don't know how, I'm sure that's a data question. We'll ask that one of Greg or look through green pages or what have you. Someone will tell us about that. Okay. So, other stories now that I've delivered on that promise. Let's see, where should we go for Friday? Well, Washington Post makes a good point. Matea Gold with another interesting story. The pitch for which on Twitter was slightly different from the pitch made in the headline here. The headline is Trump donors continue to give millions after his election victory. But the bigger point, the selling point that went along with that was tweeted out along with the link to the article, was about the amount of dollars that Trump was able to launder through the campaign apparatus to pay to himself for real estate, for office space, and other expenses. And I guess it's all totaled up now. Matea is not the only name on the byline here, except now again I have to take a crack at a difficult to sight read surname. Anu Narayan Swamy. Narayan Swamy is my best stab at that one, and I should get used to it. I mean, it's a Washington Post reporter. That name's going to happen again and again. Anyway, the story, which is a slightly more important angle on all this, the online fundraising machine that Donald Trump's campaign built with the Republican National Committee kept churning after his election victory, bringing in millions in the 3 weeks after he won, new Federal Election Commission filings show. Donors gave at least $3.5 million after November 8th to the National Party and 2 joint fundraising committees with the Trump campaign. That does not include many low-dollar contributions, which are not required to be reported by date, or contributions made directly to Trump's campaign committee, which were not individually available late Thursday night. The cash flow suggests that the donor file the Trump campaign built with the RNC will continue to pay dividends. We'll see. That list swelled to 10 million email addresses by the end of the campaign, including those of more than 2.5 million donors, according to party officials. The post-election donations came as a Trump fundraising committee peppered supporters with email solicitations offering Trump-branded merchandise and Christmas ornaments, helping the president-elect outraise his Democratic rival Hillary Clinton for the first and only time this cycle. From October 20th to November 28th, Trump's campaign and 2 joint fundraising committees with the RNC brought in a total of $111 million, edging out the nearly $106 million Clinton's campaign raised with its 2 joint fundraising committees. The Republicans' total was boosted by the $10 million he gave his campaign in late October. As a matter of fact, I would say that's the difference. In all, the billionaire real estate developer put $66.13 million of his personal funds into the bid, a substantial sum, but far short of the $100 million he repeatedly said he would end up contributing. Over the course of the campaign, Clinton substantially outraised Trump, bringing in more than the $1 billion she aimed to collect in conjunction with the National Party. More than 3.1 million individual donors supported her bid. Trump's campaign collected $853 million with the RNC filing show. In the final stretch of the race, the Republican nominee's spending picked up, but he still spent far less than his rival. And here's where the interesting part lies. Trump raced through the $94 million spending $94 million between late October and late November. The biggest share, $39 million, went to the firm American Media and Advocacy Group to place television ads. Another $29 million for digital consulting and online ads was paid to Giles Pascal. Remember them? We mentioned them once or twice. The company of the campaign's digital director, Brad Pascal. We are not sure how to pronounce that name. Pascal, does he say it? Or do we Euroize it? Anyway, the polling firm of campaign manager Kellyanne Conway received $427,000. Small change. The campaign also spent $2.9 million reimbursing Trump properties for expenses in the final filing period. Trump's air charter, TAG Air, right? Trump Air Group is TAG. TAG Air was paid more than $2 million. Trump Tower received $462,000, and Trump International in Las Vegas was reimbursed $177,000. In all, his campaign spent about $12.5 million reimbursing Trump companies and family members for expenses over the course of the campaign. And of course, he's a self-funder because something. And I'll put millions of dollars into the campaign, and we're billionaires, and we can do this sort of thing. My kids will fly all over the place at no cost to you to campaign for me, except give me $12.5 million. Okay. Sure. Anyway, keep Tag Air in mind. That's where all the money is going to be going from the Secret Service. Every time his kids do anything, business trip, vacation, just want to run up the tab, whatever, when they take his planes out and fly on the company planes, they charter them, quote unquote. This is one of those things that he's able to do that others are simply unable to, ordinary people, as you know, don't incorporate themselves quite as frequently as the ultra mega super wealthy. And that's sort of one of the things that makes them different, right? So if you think of yourself, if you thought, oh my God, I'd love to be so rich that I would, I'd be able to have my own fleet of private aircraft. I mean, let me tell you something. Private aviation, if you can do it, is fantastic. I don't have a plane, and I don't ever anticipate having a plane. But if you join, if enough of you join Serena Blaze, who tweets as Peace Arena, and who I just retweeted, noting that she says, thank you very much, by the way, Serena, just pledged to Kagro X's Kagro in the Morning, hashtag KITM, on Patreon, 38th patron. She says, what? Come on, listeners, support his considerable contribution to our knowledge and entertainment. I wanted to tweet that out for you to take a look at and to consider contributing, even though that will draw today probably a great deal of trolling from the right wing, who are satisfied with themselves for having made, I guess, or made personal attacks in trying to dissect the high noon January 3rd proposal. So that'll be fun. But if it leads to more contributions to keep the show going, well, I guess I'll take those slings and arrows. But yeah, we could use a little bit more. Then I could buy myself a private jet. Be fantastic. Or get gas for my car. That's another thing I might do instead. I'm going to start with that. I say small steps. You know, I like to keep it real. Anyway, but private aviation, fantastic thing if you can do it. And apparently he can make it work, even though he's scrambling to keep the cash flowing. Basically, right, if you get rich and you buy yourself a private plane, you fly wherever you want, it's great. And when you're not flying, whatever. You're wasting money on a jet, but who cares? You're mega wealthy, right? Not Donald Trump. That's not the way he does it. He forms a corporation, Tag Air, and the corporation buys the plane. And now the corporation, I guess, the bank account is populated somehow not out of his pocket necessarily, but probably from others of the businesses. The excuse being, this is the way corporate jet ownership works, right? You say, I do my job as a CEO better by being able to have access to a private aircraft. So I can get anywhere on a moment's notice. I don't have to worry about commercial airline scheduling. We can fly to smaller airports that are closer to where I go. I waste less time in airports and transiting. I mean, if you're one of those guys that every second counts for, and by that I mean not you and me, like every second counts, like gee whiz, I'd like to do things with my life and it's nice to spend time with my family, yada. No. When I say every second counts, we have to talk about money. Obviously, that's the way we value everything in this country or in this world. We're talking about people for whom, who earn your yearly salary in those few minutes. It makes a big difference to their pockets. You and me, our time is not valuable because we're just regular people. Unfortunately, that's the way it works. Anyway, it's great to have access to the jets and all, and that's why you buy them, but this is why the businesses pay for them. It's arguably a business tool. and it's something you can defend to the board, even if even if you chiefly end up using it flying around for vacation. You're like, well, I'm the CEO, but I'm a working person, gotta have vacations, definitely gotta have time off. You all know that. But all my vacations are working vacations. You know that. I'm always on the phone doing deals, and I can't afford to waste time in line at security checkpoints, etc. on vacation either. I have to maximize my time off. So yeah, or I got to squeeze in my time off where I can get it, and that means I own a house in Florida, and instead of like you or I, if we're going to go to Florida, right? If you have a weekend free, you don't go to Florida because it's stupid to pay $800 to fly down for a weekend, and you end up spending 20 hours on the ground in a hotel in Florida. That's not going to work. But if you own a place down there, it's still stupid. You only spend 20 hours on the ground for that. But if you own a jet and a place down there, or have access to a jet, well, that's entirely different. You can get off work and have a car drive you to the executive airport, take off, snooze on the plane because it's actually comfortable, land, and just say to the pilot, hey, wait here. I'm going to spend 24 hours at my place, and I'm going to come back, and you're going to fly me back, and I'll see you at 6 a.m. on Monday so you can fly me back for work. I'm going to commute to work from my place. Well, anyway, that's why you have a corporate jet at somebody's disposal, so that can be done, and it doesn't actually cost them money out of pocket. Trump doesn't have that kind of money out of pocket. So the various Trump businesses contribute to the bank accounts of Tag Air, and when he goes places, he writes it off to the various businesses. Now, as we explained to you earlier, a couple of weeks ago in the show, now that he's doing campaign trips on the thing, and ordinarily you would say, oh, well, that's bad because the businesses that supposedly benefit from the plane ownership don't get a clear business benefit out of it if he's using it all the time for something that's outside of the business. Except, of course, he's integrated the two of them. The businesses are making out like bandits because of the campaign. So it makes sense for them to continue to pay for these things. But even better than that, now that he's traveling with giant entourage and with Secret Service agents as well, if he did not own his own planes, or rather he didn't own Tag Air and Tag Air didn't own its own planes, they would be flying on something else, someone else's plane that they were chartering, and the Secret Service still, you need a dozen seats or whatever it is, anytime they go anyplace, they would be paying the charter service for that airfare. It's just one of the realities of how things work. You're going to have to follow this guy around. You're going to travel on an airplane. You're going to travel on an airplane, you got to pay somebody to fly you around on an airplane. But don't worry about it. They're chartering it, and you're going to end up, you'll be paying money to some, at random air charter business. Although you're probably almost always in most campaigns paying it to, you're paying to charter the plane of somebody who's a big friend and or donor of the candidate. That's probably true all the time. But it's never been the candidate themselves before. Now, if you want to travel or have to travel with Donald Trump or any member of his family, and you do it on Tag Air, and you're a member of the Secret Service, you're paying Donald Trump. You're paying Donald Trump. You're paying Donald Trump to take a flight to watch one of his kids vacation. So while they're on vacation, you have to throw yourself in the path of any bullets, and you're paying him for the airline flight to get there and back. Isn't that fantastic? What a great job. Well, what can you do? He's brilliant at skimming money. You'd think he'd have more of it at this point. Anyway, so that's the reason to keep Tag Air in mind. Don't forget about them. It's like Newt Gingrich's favorite one. The, what was it? Moby Dick Airways. All right. So that was, the key moment, I think, in all this was pointing out that $12.5 million went into the campaign and then right back out again and into Donald Trump's various businesses. Trump's campaign ended last month with $7.6 million in the bank. It also had $767,000 in outstanding bills, all owed to pollster Tony Fabrizio's firm. Poor guy. Gee whiz. The campaign is continuing to contest the amount Fabrizio said he's owed, the latest filing shows. Clinton's campaign raced through $130.8 million in the final stretch. She had just $839,000 on hand at the end of November and no debt. How fiscally responsible of her. Okay. Well, I thought that was an important point. So now you got a number to put on it. $12.5 million is the final amount that he laundered during the campaign back into his own pockets. No telling how much of that will continue during the time to come. By the way, because I'm here on the Washington Post pages, I see the number one most read story is that story to which I had referred earlier, and I'll use one of my last remaining clicks of the month to open it up. This is what happens when Donald Trump attacks a private citizen on Twitter. You'll recall I was telling you about the young woman, then 18 years old, Lauren Batchelder, who stood up at a political forum in New Hampshire and told Donald Trump that she didn't think he was a friend to women. He's not. He thinks he is. She thinks he's not. She's right. He's wrong. The next morning, Trump fired back on Twitter. He couldn't think of it right then and there. I guess it took him a while. And then he fires back on Twitter, calling Batchelder an arrogant young woman and accusing her of being a plant from a rival campaign. In this case, actually, Jeb Bush. This was during the primaries. Her phone began ringing with callers leaving threatening messages that were often sexual in nature. Her Facebook and email inboxes filled with similar messages as her addresses circulated on social media and her photo flashed on the news. She fled home to hide. I didn't really know what anyone was going to do, she said. Now, she's 19, by the way. She's never discussed her experience with a reporter until now. She thought he was only going to tweet about it and then that was it. But I didn't really know what his supporters were going to do. That, to me, was the scariest part. And this is what happens when Trump targets a private citizen who publicly challenges him. When Trump tweeted about Batchelder in October 2015, he had fewer than 5 million followers. Now he's got 17 million. And he's bragged that having a Twitter account is, quote, like owning the New York Times without the losses, unquote. Twitter has become Trump's cyber magic wand, allowing him to quickly act on a fleeting idea, a fit of anger, or something he sees on television. Now that he's president-elect, that's not funny. The power of Trump's tweets has only increased. With one tweet, Trump can change headlines on cable news, move financial markets, or cause world leaders to worry. With one tweet last week, Trump inflamed the conflict with China. With another, on Tuesday, Trump caused Boeing stock to plummet. With a third, on Wednesday night, Trump prompted a series of threatening calls to the home of a union leader who had called him a liar. Although Trump said months ago that he would likely give up Twitter if elected, I doubt very much that's going to happen. He has shown little signs of doing so. He'll soon inherit the @POTUS account, which has 12.5 million followers. He probably won't even use it. It's less than the 17 he's got. I think I'm very restrained and I talk about important things, Trump said during an interview with the Today Show this week. Frankly, it's a modern-day form of communication. Well, that's true. I get it out much faster than a press release. I get it out much more honestly than dealing with dishonest reporters. So many reporters are dishonest. For Batchelder, who studies history and gender studies at St. Anselm College in Manchester, New Hampshire, which I'm sure the alt-right trolls can't get enough of. Gender studies. The abuse continues more than a year later. 5 days before the election, she received a Facebook message that read, "Wishing I could effing punch you in the face. I then proceed to stomp your head on the curb and urinate in your bloodied mouth, and I know where you live, so watch your effing back, punk." Isn't that great? By the way, stomping on her head on the curb, that's curb stomping, and who loved tweeting about curb stomping before he realized that, oh my goodness, I don't like Donald Trump? Rick Wilson. Just pointing that out. Look, everybody makes mistakes in their background, and I'm sure he wishes he had that one to do over again. I do believe that. I mean, I don't think he's a great guy or anything. I just think he would probably like that one back in hindsight. Everybody gets a little riled on Twitter. It happens. Anyway, so there's more about this background and more about their exchange, but really, all you really need to know from this story is that this is the kind of stuff that happens. And I wanted to point out, as I mentioned earlier, this excerpt further down in the piece here. CNN and other media outlets covered the striking exchange, which generated conversation online. They're talking about the actual exchange at the town hall meeting. But Batchelder went to bed that night thinking her moment in the spotlight was over. But after midnight, Trump's director of social media tweeted out screen grabs of Batchelder's social media accounts. Think about exactly what that means. I mean, that's the kind of thing that ordinarily would end up getting you fired from a campaign. Apparently not here. So he tweets that stuff out. Trump's supporters launched investigations of their own. And you got to look out for those self-investigation types, right? One just showed up at in D.C. at Comet Pizza. Just investigating with a gun. At 7:39 a.m., Trump tweeted, remember, this is the next morning. He's still angry. The arrogant young woman who questioned me in such a nasty fashion, at no labels yesterday, no labels, you're just nasty, was a Jeb staffer. And then, incongruously, how can he beat Russia and China? That makes no sense whatsoever. How does he come by? She's a Jeb staffer. Apparently, at one point, she volunteered in a Jeb Bush campaign office to see if, is this the candidate for me? No, not really. And that was that. Okay. Anyhow, that's where we stand these days. If you raise your voice, he six trolls on you. You just got to learn how to deal with it, and it's not that easy. And when you're really the focus of concentrated fire about it, it's an extraordinarily difficult thing to weather. It really can be. All right, let's see. What else have we got here? That I told myself we would share. We'll see whether I deliver on all the promises. Let's see. Oh, well, you know what? There's a piece that I mentioned yesterday, so that'll dictate which direction we go. Definitely some other things I really want to share with the rest of you, but I mentioned this one yesterday. I'll give you some weekend reading to do. Perhaps I ought to actually, maybe some of these things I should record for the big old holiday break that's coming up in a couple of weeks. Might as well get prepared for that ahead of time. I mentioned to you Jonathan Chait's article yesterday. Donald Trump has proven liberals right about the Tea Party. Why don't we read something about liberals being proven right? Just a little bit. Time magazine's profile of Donald Trump, you notice, he says it's man of the year. By the way, did you notice Donald Trump tweeting or mentioning yesterday? I guess he had another one of his rallies. He was, I guess, happy about being person of the year, as they now say, over at Time. But he actually complained, why didn't they just say it? I'm a man. I could be man of the year. I'm a man of the year. Why not say man of the year? Why person of the year? They have to be so PC these days. Okay, fine. You got a wiener. Terrific. Good for you. Well done. It's important for you to know. I guess we got to tell you. Just like if I say happy holidays, you mean you hate Christmas. You're the person of the year. That means you hate men. You know what? Get a life, dude. All right. Donald Trump, Time Magazine's man of the year, as even Jonathan Chait says, notes he has little patience for the organizing principle of the Tea Party, the idea that the federal government must live within its means and lower its debts. That is to say, Time, in profiling Trump, states that that's his view, I guess, of these things. There's no way he would put together such a cogent statement himself. What's astonishing about this sentence, which appears in a generally fascinating and well-done story, is its casual acceptance of the premise that fiscal discipline is, or was, the Tea Party's organizing principle. Yeah, that's a good point. Why would you say that? When the Tea Party appeared on the scene in 2009, an intense partisan dispute broke out as to just what this movement represented. Conservatives insisted that what spurred protesters into the streets and town halls were the timeless principles of conservative movement thought: advocacy of balanced budgets, adherence to a strict constructionist version of the Constitution, opposition to crony capitalism, and skepticism of Keynesian economics. Liberals suggested a different explanation. The Tea Party was an expression of ethno-nationalist rage centered around a black president and the belief that his coalition stood for redistribution from older white America to its younger, more diverse supporters. Reports by close students of the phenomenon like Theda Skopel and Vanessa Williamson or Stanley Greenberg revealed that deep-seated fear of demographic change, rather than abstract constitutional or economic principles, lay at the heart of this revolt against Obama. We had that same argument again. Oh yeah, it's economic anxiety, right? You recall. Anyway, one could not have devised a sequence of events more perfectly designed to prove the liberal theory of the case than the election of Donald Trump. Here is a politician whose devotion to ethno-nationalism is total, and whose support for constitutional conservatism is non-existent. He openly flouts Republican norms, threatening to jail his political opponents, and encouraging violence against protesters. When House Republicans begged him at a July meeting to throw them a bone by saying something nice about the country's founding document, he, like me, rambled incoherently by the on-the-record account of Republicans present at the meeting, and promised to protect, remember this, the non-existent Article 12. What? Trump is justifying his plans to jack up the deficit on Keynesian grounds. Sometimes you have to prime the pump, he tells Time. And many have noted the GOP's sudden reversal on an economic theory it rejected in 2009. But to call this a mere reversal understates the case substantially. Keynesian theory does not advocate deficit spending under all circumstances. It holds that fiscal stimulus is the correct response to a specific, rare emergency, when interest rates are not strong enough to prevent the economy from falling into a liquidity trap. Keynesians can argue about just what conditions are dire enough to justify the strong remedy of deficit spending. 2009 was an easy one, a once-in-a-century catastrophe for which monetary stimulus alone could not hope to suffice. But to support Keynesian stimulus in 2016, with unemployment at 4.6%, is a completely different story. That is a circumstance only the most indiscriminate Keynesian, what economists used to call vulgar Keynesians, would deem suitable for stimulus. And yet, Republicans who rejected stimulus when it was unquestionably necessary have followed Trump's call to employ it in far murkier circumstances. I don't know how good I feel about that one, but it's an interesting point. Perhaps Trump's most comic violation of so-called conservative principle is his blatant favoritism toward individual business firms. I guess grabbing people by the pussy isn't one of the tops for violations of so-called conservative principles, but okay, he's talking about economics. Fine. Remember the hysterical fears of crony capitalism and even gangster government when the Obama administration, believe it or not, subsidized green energy technology and prevented the collapse of the auto industry in the face of frozen credit markets? Now Trump is happily embracing specific tax favors for firms that allow him to boast he has saved jobs. One can only imagine the horror Republicans would have displayed if Obama threatened retribution against a firm, causing its stock price to tank after its CEO criticized his policies. Yeah, well, that's getting stale at this point, but yes, it's still true. Yet, even conservative intellectuals, or pseudo-intellectuals, have cheered him on. When Ted Cruz, self-styled foe of crony capitalism, was asked about the special deal for Carrier, he gushed. I think the American people were gratified to have an incoming president, an incoming administration that will fight to keep jobs here in America and reduce the burdens on small businesses and job creators so that we see millions of new high-paying jobs and wages rising across the country. Limbaugh explained to his listeners why Boeing's political loyalties are suspect and thus why President-elect Trump is clever to punish it. If somebody involved in the Tea Party debate of 2009 and 10 had predicted the events of 2016, conservatives would have refused to believe it. Hell, even most liberals would have refused to believe it. It's one thing to suspect Tea Party rhetoric was phony, quite another to believe it was the entire GOP would disregard every single putative principle of the movement even before it had its hands on power. Why is anybody pretending these notions ever really mattered? I don't know. Except I feel like we were there a long time ago. But hey, Jonathan Chait is willing to join us. Well, so now I don't feel quite as good about having read the article about liberals being proven right, but it never gets any better. I mean, really, the hippie punching never stops, and one of the easiest evergreen statements you could possibly come up with is, "Hey, the dirty hippies were right again." Keep it in your pocket. You'll need it. Again, I promise you. Okay, let's see. Trying to comb through Pocket and see what else we might want to bring up. Oh, yeah. Not sure if we would get through this particular piece, but I wanted to bring this to your attention. LA Times reporting this piece. Is this the reporter who's tweeting it out himself? Chris Megarian, who has a piece in the LA Times running under the headline of Meet Wilbur Ross. Wheat Milbur. Everybody. Wilbur, Milbur, whatever. Oh, meet Wilbur Ross, who you and I know from the show as the billionaire investor guy who owned the Sago mine through various intermediaries during when they had their disastrous explosion, and who's now the Commerce Secretary, or the incoming Commerce Secretary. Meet Wilbur Ross, who once bailed out Trump in Atlantic City. Yeah. And is now his pick for Commerce Secretary. Chris's tweet said, Wilbur Ross is the killer investor who once spared Donald Trump in Atlantic City. Now he may become Commerce Secretary. That's an angle we didn't have on him before. And since I turned off my ad blocker on the LA Times at their request, I thought I might take a look at their piece here. I hope that I see that they're auto-playing video, which is the reason I put ad blocker on my computer in the first place, has been running for about a minute. I didn't hear it in my headphones. I hope you didn't hear it at home. Anyway, gee whiz, thanks a lot. Way to pay me back for whitelisting your site, LA Times. Thanks a bunch. Well, we won't hold it against Chris Megarian. He's just the reporter on this piece. But some interesting angle on Ross that we didn't have before. Wilbur Ross became rich, can you believe it? Investing in faltering businesses like steel mills and coal mines, finding a fortune in blue-collar industries that others dismissed as beyond saving. I hope the tenor of this changes. I mean, I think that it's supposed to because of the headline hints that it's going to. But right off the bat, can I just say this? This is the heart of the show. You read these things and you make comments on it. Wilbur Ross became rich investing in faltering businesses, blah, 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 blue-collar industries that others dismissed as beyond saving. They dismissed them as beyond saving because they were largely beyond saving. And Wilbur Ross, though he made money in buying them, did not save them. That's not it. He's not a turnaround artist. He's an extraction artist. Of course, he bought things that others thought were beyond saving because he bought them not with an eye toward saving them, but with an eye toward extracting what resources there still were in them. And he became a billionaire doing it because he bought things that other people, when people were looking for businesses that they could run or even improve and turn around and sell off again and make a going concern, keep a going concern, they skipped over these. So these were market castaways, so they were available for next to nothing. Do you buy, if you've got cash laying around or access to equity that you can borrow from other people, you buy businesses that have extraction value, extract it, and then dump the carcass. It's cold, but it's good business, right? But the point really here is, other people dismissed them as beyond saving, and so did Wilbur Ross. So he just bought them not for saving them, but for killing them. All right. But before he was scooping up Rust Belt factories, the banker was sizing up another troubled asset, Donald Trump, which really, that's the tip there, right? In other words, at the time, everybody else thought that Donald Trump was beyond saving, and he was like, oh, here's a guy who can't do anything. He's on his knees. He's being crushed by debt. I can run in there, there's a pot of money here somewhere because everything in this place is covered in gold. If I can get at the money that he's using to buy these stupid gold fixtures and pay for his jet, I might make out here. So there you go. He's a bailout artist, a turnaround extraction artist, and when he was looking for the next disaster to suck the cash out of, Donald Trump comes to mind. More than 2 decades ago, Ross represented bondholders who were gunning for Trump after he failed to pay back the high-interest loans he had taken out to build his casino empire, because he's stupid at business. When Ross arrived in Atlantic City, New Jersey for negotiations in 1990, he found a throng of journalists and curious onlookers eager to catch a glimpse of Trump, according to the Vulture Investors by Hillary Rosenberg. For the quiet Ross, the scene inspired a revelation. Trump's flashy image had resilience. Ross embarked on a strategy that helped Trump avoid a personal bankruptcy that could have derailed his unlikely trajectory from real estate mogul to reality television star to president-elect. Although, I don't know. I guess it would have derailed that if he hadn't, or if he had gone into personal bankruptcy, who knows what would happen. But I guess if you save him, well, if you don't save him, maybe if you don't save him, maybe he's not as attractive as a reality television property. But then again, I don't know. The whole reality television thing was about his own rehabilitation more than anything else. Okay. Consider it another investment that has paid off for Ross, whom Trump recently tapped to lead the Department of Commerce. A private equity billionaire who once led a secret Wall Street fraternity. That sounds like a good outsider kind of guy. Ross is among the rich, loyal insiders Trump picked for a cabinet that is shaping up as the wealthiest in history. If confirmed by the Senate, the 79-year-old veteran investor, will spearhead trade policy and business development in the new administration. Trump rejected criticism that Ross was too out of touch to serve, saying during a rally last week in Cincinnati that Ross was chosen because this guy knows how to make money, folks. Trump added, "I put on a killer." Ross, however, once spared Trump. He's a killer for the rest of you guys. He's help for me. He's got my back. The future president-elect at one time owned a quarter of Atlantic City's casino market. But Trump was heavily in debt, and he started missing bond payments on his and Atlantic City's largest casino, the Taj Mahal, in 1990. Ross, then an investment banker working for Rothschild Incorporated, oh my, wait, don't tell the alt-right, oh my God, helped bondholders negotiate with Trump, whose finances were unraveling. The final deal reduced Trump's ownership stake in the Taj, but left him in charge, and bondholders were unhappy when Ross presented the plan. Why did we make a deal with him? One asked. According to Rosenberg's book, Ross insisted that Trump was worth saving. The Trump name is still very much an asset, he said. Trump himself proved to be less of a sure bet. Though the agreement allowed Trump to soldier on in Atlantic City, his casinos landed in bankruptcy court twice more. The president-elect respects Ross's deal-making skills, said Jason Miller, because they work to my benefit, the communications director for Trump's transition team. He's seen Mr. Ross up close and personal, Miller said. He knows that he can depend on him. Ross grew up in New Jersey and attended a Jesuit prep school in New York before earning degrees from Yale and Harvard Business School. He spent 2 decades at Rothschild, working on bankruptcies before starting his own private equity firm, W.L. Ross & Company, in 2000. A Palm Beach, Florida resident who owns an art collection valued at 9 figures and is worth an estimated $2.5 billion, according to Forbes. Ross earned a reputation as a so-called vulture investor for finding profits in dying businesses. Ross described himself differently, of course, in an interview with New York Magazine. We're a phoenix that rebuilds itself from the ashes. So much nicer. At the Commerce Department, Ross will oversee a portfolio containing responsibilities as diverse as weather research and promoting minority-owned businesses. Yeah, right. Sure. However, with Trump in the White House, foreign trade likely will be the issue that gets most of Ross's attention. Trump has promised to remake free trade deals. The department has wide latitude to determine when other countries are violating trade rules, experts said, allowing U.S. officials to slap tariffs on imports or find loopholes in international agreements. The Trump administration won't rush toward tariffs, but wants to renegotiate some deals, Ross told the CNBC after he was tapped by Trump. We've been doing a lot of dumb trade, he said, echoing Trump's campaign trail rhetoric. Trump's pronouncement that companies that leave the U.S. will face a 35% tariff on goods they want to sell domestically has been met with a tepid response from his fellow Republicans. Republican leaders on Capitol Hill suggested this week they would not go along with such a proposal, though they emphasized that they would wait to hear exactly what Trump had in mind. Take a deep breath. He's not sworn in yet, House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy told reporters. Let's not predetermine what the outcome of this stuff is. But even Trump's Vice President-elect, Mike Pence, deflected when asked repeatedly on MSNBC whether he agrees with the proposed tariff. Lots more discussion of the various tariff issues that appear to be going nowhere. But that, I thought, was the most interesting part of the background on the old relationship between Wilbur Ross and Donald Trump. Definitely some information you're going to want to have at your disposal, perhaps for the weekend as you're discussing things with friends and others around you. That reminds me, by the way, that I mentioned to you the other day, I forget whose article it was, the possibility of Trump not putting together a presidential budget. And I remember mentioning that I thought, I think he's not likely to, or the guess that he wouldn't do one is likely to be a good guess. And the reason that he wouldn't bother doing one, I think, is more likely the less sophisticated one, which is it's hard and I don't have a lot of time and I haven't hired an OMB director yet whose job that would be chiefly. So I'm not going to be ready. Plus, I also don't know what to do and it sounds hard. But I thought there might be room for giving Trump credit for being more politically savvy than most people guess if he were aware. And every once in a while, like the old Trump shows a few flashes of understanding of these things. Back in the older pre-1990, when he was appearing, when he gave a couple of appearances as a witness before some congressional committees, when he was still fighting on the casino issues, where he was just sharper mentally, I think. And he's an older guy now, so a lot of time has passed. But he seemed a lot more politically savvy then, and some of that residual savvy has to be in there somewhere. I don't know whether it prevents him from doing anything terribly stupid anymore, but I believe it's in there. I know there's some good in you, Father. But I would give him some credit if I believed that, and they could put out this statement. Someone else can write it up for him, and I guess we'd have to credit it. If I believed that he understood, hey, a president's budget is pretty much a garbage document when you're talking about, well, certainly when you put it in the hands of a Congress run by Republicans. Generally it's the case, even if your party, the party of the president, also dominates Congress. Even when a Democratic president sends a budget to a Democratic Congress, they say it's dead on arrival, or it's just a rough guide to what we're going to do. And I noticed barely in the trolling from last night from the Federalist guys, I guess they dug up some old quote. The guy is Sean is apparently intent on re-engaging with me, which I'm just not likely to do. My job was to deliver, as I saw it, was to deliver the thinking on the high noon play and then leave it on the table. And if there's any indication of any interest at all in doing anything, let that be a starting point. If you're not willing to pull that maneuver in particular, let's talk about things you might be willing to do on whether it be on Garland or anybody else or any other issue. It doesn't, to me, the odds of them pulling that, I think, was always near zero. And it doesn't worry me a great deal that they wouldn't end up doing it. I'm sorry that they won't do it, but it doesn't surprise me, and it's not the sort of thing I will hold against them in terms of, I'm going to, campaign against you guys. Sean was asking me, well, are you or are you not going to primary anybody who won't pull your maneuver? No, that's not usually the way I run those things. Anyway, I guess he went through old tweets where apparently we had some disagreement in the past over the nature of the federal budget, and I guess he was harping on Obama not submitting a fully fleshed out budget in the immediate aftermath of one of the big the deal that followed the super committee and ended up, and left us with sequestration, right? And then they cut a 2-year deal that had some very specific spending caps that really basically vitiated the need for any kind of new budget, certainly from the president. And I guess that made him mad. And at the time I was saying, the budget is a congressional thing. I mean, strictly speaking, talking about the the real budget is a congressional document, and the president doesn't have that much to do with it. And even when they rework his budget and turn it into the congressional budget, which is the one that counts, he doesn't sign it. It just really doesn't involve the presidency in any real way, except as a rough guide of what priorities would you like to see funded. They listen to you as far as that goes. And so he dug that one up because I guess he thought this was another example of me not being grounded in reality and understanding the way things really worked, which is ironic because that particular exchange will come into play again very shortly should Trump decide not to submit a budget. It will have held true. I will have told him in 2012 when he was crying about Obama not submitting a budget that it wouldn't really matter, essentially. And while it's infuriating that Donald Trump would campaign on the idea that he had the fiscal chops to make this country work again, and then given the opportunity to design its budget, he wouldn't do it, the reality is the budget's just not designed from the White House. And so, despite the fact that I think he's skipping out on it because it's just too damn hard, he could put out the statement, and I'd probably say, maybe there is a spark of intelligence in there after all, that just says, look, that's just not the reality of budgeting. I mean, I'll lay out what my priorities are, but the budget is formulated inside Congress, and that's all there is to it. I don't even get a chance to veto it, much less line item veto it. I don't see it until it becomes appropriations, and that's true. It just would be particularly ironic, I guess, for him to have dug that piece up just weeks before that disagreement, during which he said it was such an outrage that President Obama wouldn't submit a fully fleshed out budget. And to bring that up as an example of my detachment from reality and have it just come out just weeks before his own party's president pulls something even dumber, just doesn't submit a document at all. Or who knows, maybe they'll scratch something out on a napkin and put that out too. But I have a feeling that he'll be just fine with that once Trump does it. Of course, it doesn't really matter. If it still bothers him and the hypocrisy of it bothers him more, then he can just say, well, I'm not a Trump supporter, so it doesn't matter to me what he does. I don't have to defend what he does. But, if it irritates you that the guy doesn't put a budget out, then it irritates you. It doesn't matter whether you support him or not. Me, I guess I get the luxury of saying, I don't really care what would be in the guy's budget anyway, and if we really want to give the guy a leg up and give him some credit that he probably doesn't deserve, truth is, doesn't matter what the hell the president puts in the budget. Never did. But it's a charade we all like to engage in, and he campaigned on it, so maybe you would think he would do something, but I guess not. Anyway, we have yet to see how that will develop. I have a feeling that someone may convince him to publish some volume of nonsense and put a cover on it that says budget, and then he'll say he's done. That's basically it. All right, let's see. I have word here from Josie that she may be available to come on in here and help us close out the show and redirect things a little bit too, and bring us some news from a different perspective and from different quarters of our playing field here. Let's see. Well, all right. No, she just sent a note. Wanted to know if we were available. And door's open, Josie. Anytime you'd like to come on in, you just let me know. And ring us up on Skype, and we'll plug you in. Okay. So, a few other items that maybe I will send your way, those of you following along at home, to look into. I know I've raised this as an issue in the past before. The weird and wild and woolly folks who make up the tenants and residents of various Trump properties. Trump Tower, where he has his own home, not the only place stocked with weirdos, I found out. And seeing a tweet from Garance Frank Ruda just yesterday. I'll share the contents of that with you. But in this case, we're talking about the Trump World Tower, where the place over by the UN, where the Saudis bought 2 floors not that long ago. But that place is full of weirdos too, and I'll share that story with you for your own weekend reading. In the meantime, Josie Duffy joins us to help close things out again on Friday. How you doing, Josie?
Good. I'm sorry it's a little late in the morning. There's a lot going on today.
All right. Well, you can anything you can tell us about that?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm going to tell you guys just about one thing today, and that's that the Brennan Center has come out with a new report this morning, and it's actually featured in the New York Times. And I'll send you the article, and you could maybe send it out. It's really great.
Sure.
But the report is about the number of people in prison right now that could be let out of prison without any threat to public safety. And their argument is that 40% of the U.S. prison population should not be in prison. They've either paid their debts or they've all paid their debts, and there also wouldn't be a threat to public safety. And the reason that's interesting is because that's way more than just nonviolent offenders. That means there are a lot of violent offenders, quote unquote violent offenders, in prison right now who we should let out. And it goes back to a point I think I've made on here a couple of times, which is that the dichotomy between violent and nonviolent offenders and offenses is kind of an imagined one. It varies across state lines. There's a lot of stuff that's considered violent that we would consider nonviolent. There's a lot of stuff that's considered violent that we would actually not even maybe think should be in prison at all. And the Brennan Center report is really interesting. I'll send that over, but there's the New York Times article also lays out some scenarios and asks the reader to kind of say how long they think that the person in the scenario should be in prison. And then it tells you how long they actually got. And it really is a well done kind of layout of the problem with sentencing in America today.
That's probably pretty fascinating, I imagine. That's like the old Alcoa, you make the call things. That's
right.
Good exercise.
Exactly.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
40%? Is that the number you mentioned?
40%. So, the prison population is declining, but it's declining so slowly that we would have to, it'll take us another 70 years to get back to the levels we were 20, 30 years ago. And, the problem with that is that now we're going to have a new DOJ, right? We've talked about Sessions a lot on here,
yes.
But, I don't see the prison population declining at such a rapid rate over the next few years unless progressives make a big push for it on the state and local level. So we're going to be facing this problem for some time, and we have to have a real conversation about, my brother, who, recently was, let out of jail, after a 90-day stint that he did after, testing positive for marijuana. And he's been on, parole for, 12 years for a violent offense. And his violent offense was that he sprayed a guy with pepper spray during a fight that they got in when he was 18. Now, that was a mistake, and that was the wrong thing to do, and we knew it was the wrong thing to do at the time, and I was mad at him, and I'm not justifying spraying people with pepper spray, but the guy he sprayed also wants him off parole. He wasn't permanently injured. They're friends now. This is like making that mistake does not make him a violent offender forever, a violent person forever, but he will be considered a violent person forever. And it means that the non-violent stuff he does, like violating, parole for smoking marijuana, which is his first parole violation ever, will end up that he lost his job. He, had to spend 90 days in prison. He spent his 30th birthday in prison. It changes. He had to lose his apartment, and he has to start back from scratch now. Yeah.
Now, you say this was 12 years that he was on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Come on. That's crazy. And I mean, it's certainly interesting that the guy he was involved with has this to say. I doubt very much. Who's friends with the UC Davis pepper spray cop now? Nobody. But by the way, certain people, because they're essential. Okay, I don't know. I don't want to disparage university system cops or anything, but somebody gets the badge and you empty the canisters in the face of nonviolent protesters on camera, doing your job. Somebody else, young person, gets involved in a fight. Fight's a pretty serious thing. There are many ways that could have gone even worse. 12 years later, you know what? I'm going to pull the rug out from under you. You got to start all over again.
Yep.
Because back then, you pepper sprayed somebody. This guy over here, we want him pepper spraying people. You, not so much.
Right.
Yeah, all right, that's awful.
And I think the thing the point you're making is such an important one, because it just shows the kind of the like illogical connection or lack of connection we draw between what the state does and what an average citizen does, and what we're willing to forgive and what we're willing to just look at and walk right by. Exactly like you said, tear gas all over all the protesters. That's fine. That's keeping the peace, but yeah, we should. And for someone like my brother, like, what good are we doing the world? He had a job. He had a job at the city. He had been a garbage man for 8 years, and he finally got a desk job at Parks and Rec, and he had worked really, really hard for it. And then he lost one of his friends in a terrible drug overdose situation, and that's why he used marijuana like maybe once or twice in a week, and then happened to have a random drug test, and he told us, he admitted what had happened, and says it was a mistake, but he lost his desk job, and he goes back to square one, and it's all in the name of punishment or accountability for something that he's been over punished for already.
Yeah.
And I think that this study is really important. You wouldn't look at him and think violent. We have to really talk about what it means to be a violent offender. He should not be in any of the same categories as Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
Those are two different people. And so we have to talk about that.
Oh, very true. We learn from every time we have one of these, any kind of political argument, and get serious about it. The definitions of your terms, always extraordinarily important, and it's just so easy for the other side to say, and we'll have to be careful in our approach with it. Unfortunately, we'll have to approach it very gingerly, because it's a very easy thing for them to turn into, okay, so you want to define Democrats as the party that wants to let all the violent offenders out of jail. That was too easy for you, I know.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it's very difficult, because it's also something you absolutely cannot shy away from. How are you ever going to have a productive society at all if all this, just that personal anecdote really illustrates it. And that's happened 1,000 times to 1,000 different people.
Yep. And, I think it really is a question of framing. So when people say, you want to let all the violent offenders out in jail, I try to push on, what do you mean by violent? What do you mean? What are we talking about? What do you mean? When you say violent, do you mean this guy? Do you mean the guy that robbed a bank, with his friends and his friend punched someone in the face? Do you mean a guy who gave his girlfriend heroin and she overdosed and died? Do you mean, I've seen situations of kids, two sisters fighting on a playground, young girls, just nothing like super crazy, just kind of scuffling and getting arrested at age 14 and being charged with a violent offense. If every single time you scuffled with your sister, you're a violent offender, I'm a violent offender 900 times over, and my sister's my best friend, we don't interrogate the meaning of those terms, and we have to start doing that.
True. And everybody knows that, certain kinds of other kids, that's just kids will be kids.
Exactly.
But yeah, we've certainly seen lots of kids in school situations being dragged out and arrested for things that in the good old days, like Donald Trump's good old days, that's just like dipping the kid's hair in the inkwell. Right. Exactly. Healthy American scrapping.
Exactly. And if you want to go by the technical definition of violent, dipping someone's hair in the inkwell is also violent. It's unnecessary touching. Yeah. You could really expand this to include pretty much anything. Yeah. And what's economic violence? What about bankers who sold bad mortgages and people were evicted and left on the street? I mean, to me, that's its own violence. So
what about the Access Hollywood tapes?
Exactly. That's exactly. That's if our own president is violent in a lot of different ways.
What are we going to tell the children?
Right. What are we going to tell the children?
But there's absolutely a serious point to it. The story is easily illustrates the problem. Everyone can imagine having this kind of situation. I'm glad you joined us to share that one. You're writing on it as usual.
I'm writing on it as we speak. So I will post that. I will send you that and the original article and the New York Times article. And I'd suggest that everybody check it out.
Yes, thanks very much. One of the things I like best about being able to have people on the show to give a sneak preview. You get the news before it's coming out.
News before it hits.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks for coming by and sharing that with us. I'll share those links with everybody, make sure they know where to go. And as it happens, we are at the end of the show. I know you were busy up until a few minutes ago. So thanks for coming by and telling us about it.
Thank you.
Great tip.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, Josie. We'll see you next week.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, there you go. Everybody knows now. You can go and find this over at Daily Kos. You got your weekend reading cut out for you. There's an awful lot packed into that one. And even that, I wish we had more time just so there were more stories to share. But they'll be written up. And, it's a difficult thing to get away from your writing in the morning. When you're on a roll, you're on a roll. I'm glad you were able to share that with us. Great preview. Everyone should go and check it out. And in the meantime, for the stories that we haven't gotten to today, there's always the after show. There's always something coming up after this. Stay tuned for this one. Let's see what they're covering today. Tulsi Gabbard, top billing in today's listing here. Unaware, as it happens, that civilian government is enshrined in the Constitution. Well, I could have told you that, Tulsi. Why didn't you ask me? As she scolds critics of Trump's military cabinet. Saw that story. Worthy of a mention. Trump's labor secretary pick thinks grabbing sexy models by the hamburgers he's selling is just the patriotic red-blooded American way. I'm sure Donald Trump was interested in meeting some of those models. That's how we got to this. And court records show that the New York Police Department lied, about surveillance of Black Lives Matter demonstrators and now refuses to release the records. Shocking. For the last half, the Friday news dump and recycling center, news that's been repurposed with a purpose. A Denver neighborhood rallies to boot out neo-Nazis who are terrorizing everyone there. And Donald Trump is an eerily perfect match with Umberto Eco's famous 14-point guide
on netrootsradio.com
to identify fascist leaders.
You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
And thank you for listening. All of that, plus the Connect, Unite, Act, Daily Kos Community Calendar, and more coming up on the After Show with Wink and Justice following us. Thank you very much for hanging in there with us for another week. We look forward to speaking to you again next week. Do check out that Patreon fundraiser and help support your independent media. We'll talk to you again next week.